Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB bikini pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Today's guest started competing in ICN back in 2020. She did 5 shows over 2 seasons in her first year and then turned pro in that federation in her first year of competing. She then moved on to the IFBB last year and competed a 40-week prep with Troy Thornton as her coach. She did the Queensland State Show, finishing first place in all of her categories, true novice, open, and overalls, winning the state title. Then she did the same exact thing at the NSW state show. And after this, she did her third show, which was nationals, where she swept the show again and won her pro card. She was the first Australian bikini athlete to win 2 state titles in 1 season, as well as the first Australian bikini athlete to turn pro in their first season and finish undefeated with 11 gold medals. Aside from competing, she also studies law full-time, works 2 jobs, dances professionally, and lives by herself. So we've got a lot to talk about. I'm so happy to welcome to the show PHILLIPA Ferreira. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm happy you're here. You've had a legendary journey, obviously, and you've already done so much that I think we could go so many different directions. But
Yeah.
before we do, I gotta ask if there's anything you do or think about, or maybe a ritual you have before your heel hits the stage.
Yeah, I do. It's really random.
Okay.
I have to jump 20 times and cross myself.
Oh, I did not expect this answer. When did this start and why? And are you wearing your heels?
Yeah. So, when I was like 8 or 9 years old, I was dancing and I was filling in an older age group. I was like a girl had injured herself and we were at an Australian championship competition, and like the day before they asked me to fill in with like the 14-year-old. So I did that. And as a group, the choreographer, before we went on stage to get our energy up, asked us to jump all 20 times in a big group. And
Uh-huh.
then we went on and we won the title. So from then on, my brain was like, the only way I'm ever going to win is if I jump 20 times before I go on stage. So I swear to God, since that day, I have never stepped foot on stage without jumping 20 times. And I'm talking before every single division, whether it's dancing, whether it's bodybuilding, I jump 20 times. And it has to be right before I step on stage, not a few minutes before, it's like the last thing I will have done before I take that first step is jump 20 times. And then I also crossed myself because I saw Usain Bolt do it before he broke the world record and became the fastest man. And I went, wow, like if that's going to work for him, then it'll work for me. So that's also why I do that. I saw that when I also was like 10 years old, and it's just followed me ever since.
Yeah, the power of faith and the ability to continue a ritual like that is amazing, by the way, from a very young age. And for it to work that consistently also is awesome. Now, this is like a knock on wood situation, but if it didn't work, would you continue to do it?
Yes.
I love it.
I don't know. It's almost like comforting to me. Like I'm very superstitious. So I feel like once one thing happens, and it was actually like really funny, the superstition was like an ongoing thing for me in all of my comps last season in IFBB, because it was like something that just kept happening. Like to me, it's almost like a synchronicity, like a wink from the universe. And so I guess it's less about actually like, being religious or 20 jumps actually having some influence over how you perform. And it's more just a superstition for me that if I didn't do it, then I'm walking on stage
Mm.
not with everything on my side, not with luck, not with chance, not with everything on my side.
So it's important for you to know that up until the very end, you've done everything you can to
Yeah,
get the result you want.
yeah, definitely.
Well, you made history last year, which we started to talk about in the intro, and I want to go
Yeah.
straight into that. And actually, interestingly, I just interviewed another Australian bikini pro whose episode will have come out the week prior to yours, Lisa Reed.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah, so we were talking about how difficult it is to go pro in Australia. And now I'm talking to someone who had an incredible season and journey to doing exactly that. So, what do you feel actually led you to achieving this undefeated streak?
Um,
Unless it was just the 20 jumps and the crossing yourself.
not the 20 dogs. Um, Look, I will objectively say I have a great physique. I'm aware of that. I train harder than anyone I've ever met, and that's something that I do pride myself in. I've never met someone who executes a prep as strictly as I do. In my 40-week prep, there was not a single sweetener that was consumed. There was not a single sugar-free drink, carbonated drink. There was never a single diet slip up. You hear of girls how they do slip up on diet, or they're, I don't know, having fillers to keep, coffee with sweetener, almond milk. I don't have any of that. If my coach says no, then it's no. So I do know that I have the ability and the discipline to complete a prep to the best of my ability. But I also think that beyond having a good physique and good genetics, my mindset is what gives me a competitive edge. And if you ask me, when you look at the girls that are on stage that I'm competing against, everyone has a phenomenal physique. Like, and I look at all those girls and I'm like, wow, everyone's so worthy of first place. I find them so inspiring. I'm standing around backstage going, I could never beat her. I could never beat her. Look at her shoulders, look at her glutes. But one thing I do back myself, and I do know that I have that is stronger than everybody else's, is my mindset and my work ethic.
Okay. First of all, I admire and acknowledge the fact that you said straight up, I have a great physique. The reason I think this is important is because we often downplay that. Yet it's bodybuilding. This is what we're being, come on, like
Yeah.
we're being rewarded for this. At the end of the day, you're stepping on stage, and obviously there's something to be said about exuding confidence, radiating that positivity or that mindset, that belief. However, you have a great physique and you're being rewarded for that as well. And you've maintained a commitment and a standard for yourself that you set the bar higher and higher. So every time you stepped on stage, you were looking that much better, right? You were that much more undeniable. But in order to create that, you have to have a strong mentality. And you talked a little bit about your process and working with your coach and how you guys have approached that. And something that had stood out to me from something you had said in a post actually was that you were way more process oriented than you were outcome oriented this time. So what allowed you to foster that focus, and how do you feel it actually transformed the way you showed up and the ability to execute on such strict protocols?
So this is a long question, and there's going to be a long response to that
Great.
question.
We're all
Um,
ears.
so get comfy. When I was competing in ICN, I obviously loved training, and the way I'd gotten into it was someone had actually just approached me at the gym and asked, "Oh, like, are you competing soon?" And I was like, "No, I'm just training." But that's the level I was training at. The people were assuming I was competing. And so someone actually suggested for me to look into it. In that period of my life, I was struggling with mental health. And this is before I had been diagnosed with clinical depression, anxiety. So I wasn't aware that that's what it was. I just thought that that's how life felt, that every day was a struggle, that you feel miserable, that the frequency that I was existing at was a lot lower than what a normal person would, but I just thought that that's how life felt on a day-to-day basis. So when I decided to compete, I quickly fell in love with it because I was good at it. I do acknowledge that I have great genetics for it. I have great structure. I have the work ethic. And I guess when I was winning, that was giving me an extreme sense of external validation that was supplementing the lack of internal validation I felt with myself. And I wasn't aware of this. And I kept competing back to back and doing all of the shows, and my head kind of blew up because it was like, yes, I'm the best, I'm important, I finally mean something to people, I stand for something, people starting to recognize me. They were all things that I was lacking internally. So I was looking for trophies and for followers and whatnot to replace that. I then quickly learned, when you take those things away, I had nothing. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what my values and my morals were. I didn't know what got me out of bed in the morning. And so when I started seeing my life coach, the way we kind of described it was, I had the decorations for a house, but I didn't have the house itself. So when you look at internal and external feelings, external is all the decoration, it's everything everyone else sees. The internal work is the house itself. It's your foundation, it's the brick, it's the mortar, it's what you believe in, it's what gives you purpose, or what makes you happy, the mundane things. I didn't have a house, I just had decor. And so I worked with my life coach vigorously, and a psychologist on the side as well. And the analogy we kept using was, I'm building my house. I want to find my foundations. And this is when I'd gone through a breakup and I'd stopped competing. I was struggling with a lot of mental health issues. I'd been to the doctors, I'd been diagnosed, I then got medicated. And I just needed to take a step back from competing while all this was kind of going on. And I spent a year working on building my house. So I found what makes me happy on a day-to-day basis. I found purpose. I found internal validation and meaning. And I realized that my happiness cannot ride on external things, on trophies, on titles, on spotlight and attention. That's an inside job. When I decided to compete in IFBB, I spoke about this on another podcast, but I felt like competing had been taken away from me as a result of things outside of my control, i.e. the breakup. I was actually quite literally homeless. I didn't have anywhere to go because I was living on my ex's premises. It was in the middle of COVID, so I was unemployed. My mum had moved into state, so I didn't have anywhere to go family-wise. I literally had nothing. And then competing just had to get put on the back burner. But I felt like I didn't get to stop competing because I woke up one morning and it just wasn't something I wanted to do anymore. It wasn't my decision. And I knew that I would get to a certain age and just be stuck thinking, what if, had I had pursued it, had I continued it, I didn't want to ever have to live with regret. So I figured the best way to settle that fight in my head was just do one more show. If you love it, great. If you don't, great, because your internal validation is no longer riding on that. So if you don't like it, it's not a big deal. You don't owe anyone anything to be a bodybuilder or to live up to their expectation of you. Just go do it for you, Philippa. So that's why I did the prep, and that's why the prep became so internally focused, because while I was looking shredded and impressive and this and that to everyone else, I knew the bigger picture. I knew while I was stepping on stage, my best friends and my circle around me, they knew exactly what was going on. I didn't feel the need to share this with people. I actually didn't post about me being planning on competing until I think I was about 10 weeks out. And my coach actually asked, can I post you? Because I asked him to just not. I was competing for me, not for the followers or for the attention and this and that. And then he asked me, can I post you? And I was like, do you know what? Like, yeah, sure. I was so focused on, is this going to set a fire inside me? Enjoy every single day, because you might step on stage and you might not like it and you might never do a prep again. Be present. I was also well aware that there's such a stigma when you compete that your mental health falls apart. You hear girls backstage being like, I'm so tired, I'm so exhausted, I'm so over this shit, I'm so hungry. And it's got such a negative rap. And I also wanted to prove to myself that maybe positive mental health and competing can coincide. Let's see if we can do it. So as much as I focused on the physical side and the physiological aspects, I put just as much time and effort into the internal, into seeing my life coach, into seeing a psychologist, into journaling, meditating, sitting with myself in a space and checking that I'm still okay. And I was able to go through this prep asking myself, are you tired? Yes. Are you exhausted? Yes. Are you hungry? Yes. But these are all just feelings. They're not a reflection of where I'm sitting in my mental health. I'm not my feelings. So I practiced the art of detachment. As soon as I was able to say, instead of I'm hungry, I'm feeling hungry. Just because I feel something doesn't make me that. And so I was able to prove to myself that you can preserve your mental health, and competing can be an incredibly positive experience. And you can also go far in the sport and take yourself to the extreme physically. And that's why when I won my pro card, like, I almost felt bad when everyone was like cheering for me, because obviously I was happy and I was just overwhelmed with emotion. There's photos of me with tears in my eyes, but I wasn't happy because I turned pro. I proved something to myself. Like, there was so much beyond the trophy and the title of a pro athlete. And I felt bad because I was like, people don't know that that's why I'm truly happy and moved by this achievement. It had nothing to do with the external and had everything to do with the internal. So it's also an incredible blessing that now I'm able to sit and tell that story.
It is incredible. And the story itself is beautiful, wonderful. It's everything that I personally stand for, build more than just a body. So hearing you expressing that journey you went on and how you went from not knowing who you were really outside of the external validation and not fully understanding yourself and what makes you happy aside from those things. And then realizing also, well, what if there's a version of me that can compete in a way that's also healthy mentally? And especially after getting some answers with your mental health, to then be treating that and addressing it. And I was curious how you treated it. So it sounds like you had a lot of support and you looked at it from building that house, you said. And then you talked about how when you started this prep, there was, of course, this focus on the physiological side of things, but not without the emphasis and focus still being placed on the mental side that needed to be done. And as a result of that, you pushed limits physically that even when you got to the very end and you got what everybody wants and dreams and works for, you were happy. You weren't backstage complaining. You weren't thinking about, oh, I just want all this to end. You were grateful that you got to the end while feeling as good as you did and while seeing who you became in that process. And that's a much more sustainable and fulfilling way of approaching this than maybe the version of you that was clinging to the next stage, the next trophy, the next title?
There were girls backstage that I could overhear, and they were like, I'm so fucking excited to eat after this. I'm so done. I'm so, I'm so glad it's over. And I remember I was standing backstage and I had tears in my eyes because I was like, this has been the most fulfilling and rewarding experience. And there was so much pride in myself, so much achievement, and I guess just like perseverance and the ability to come back from something. Like, this was my comeback for me. Nobody else knew I was coming back from anything. Like,
Right.
everyone thought I'd just taken a little hiatus from bodybuilding for a year, as you do. I don't know, but I was almost sad that competing was over for the season, because I felt so blessed to be feeling those feelings that I'd never previously felt in other competitions. And I didn't want them to go. And I knew it would be just as hard after prep. You lose the shreds, you lose the hype, to find those feelings in other areas of my life. But I just was so proud of myself, of how I carried myself, and the turnaround and growth that I'd seen in myself as a person, that this is what I say. Yes, my physique was great. That's awesome. But I was winning in so many other ways before I'd actually stepped on stage. So the outcome for me was somewhat irrelevant.
Right.
Because I remember saying to my mum, like, I was on the stepper and I was just like, it was like 2 weeks out and I was crying, and she was like, what's wrong? And she knows how it goes. And, sometimes you're crying just from exhaustion. And I was like, I just am so proud of myself. Like, it was happy tears. And I was like, I feel no pressure going on stage, because I can't visualize myself not getting first and feeling disappointed. Do you get, like, I couldn't see that happening. Was I to not win, I couldn't see myself being disappointed, because I was already feeling so much self-achievement, self-pride, that feeling of success, that regardless of whether I walked away with the trophy or not, like, it only added to the external part. It only added to my decor, but my house was full. My house was complete, and renovations were well and truly finished. Like, do you get me? So it was that, for me, was an incredibly blessing experience. And I think a lot of times, when girls are there and they're saying, I want it to be over and I'm so tired and I'm so hungry. And it's like, when you exist in that space, like, that's what you're going to find. You're going to find tiredness. You're going to find, we're all tired. We're all hungry. We're all overworked and whatnot. If you start to think, like, I'm so blessed to be feeling this experience. I'm so blessed that my body's gotten me this far. I'm so blessed that I'm in this incredible stage in my family. Like, there is so much opportunity to find gratitude, that when that's what you're looking for, you're going to feel that. And I think that's where the difference in mindset, and there are two different elements to mindset. Like, there's the athlete element, which I also know I have a competitive edge over. Your dedication, your drive, your focus, your work ethic. But then there's that mindset of mindfulness and just a positive life, and existing on a different frequency, a higher frequency than others. So yeah.
Are you a competitor looking to make mental gains and further your personal development? Are you struggling with the post-show blues or feeling the pressure of prep? Maybe you're lost somewhere in the middle and not sure what's next. If you really want to make peace with food, your body, and your goals, then I highly recommend you check out my competitor card deck, which can be found at www.celestial.fit/cards. This is a free resource for competitors, and the deck includes 3 different series. One is affirmations and I am statements. Another is the thought-provoking question prompts that you could journal on or just think about. And the last deck includes action steps with specific mentorship that is going to support you in those areas of which I just mentioned. So whether you're looking to feel better in your own skin, develop a healthier relationship with food, feel more motivated, connect deeply with yourself, or really get into your mindset to bring you closer to your goals, then these cards are for you, and I would love to see you utilizing them. Again, you can visit www.celestial.fit/cards to download yours right away. That goes to your earlier point about detachment. When you can completely detach from what actually is going to happen on show day, that shows that you have so much fulfillment from the daily work as well as what's already happening in your life. When you know you have that security, that peace, that happiness, your values are being fulfilled, the stage is like a bonus. I always think of the stage as like it's just another Saturday because you're already going to do this work. You're already going to show up this way. There's going to be times in your improvement season when you're hungry and tired. There's going to be times in your prep for sure where you're hungry and tired. But as you said, those are not the things that deserve our focus, our attention, or our identity. Like to exist as that being who we are. As you said, it's important to say, well, no, I'm experiencing that, much like most mental health concerns that are not personality related, it's important to look at from a mood perspective as this is something I'm feeling, I'm experiencing, but it's not me. Just like you're not an eating disorder, you're not depression, you're not anxiety, you're an experiencer of those things right now, but you can overcome them. You can work through them. You can cope. You can learn to coexist with them in a healthy way versus getting so caught up in it and letting it rule your life. So perspective is what I'm gathering here. Perspective is what's really allowed you as an athlete to shift from where you were to where you are. But there's parts of your story that I don't want to breeze over. And one of those parts is you said you were homeless, not just, metaphorically, but literally homeless. So and you were in a relationship. It was a committed relationship. You guys were living together. You didn't have a job because it was COVID. So then it ends and your season ends. And you're like, okay, now like I have this box of decorations. What did you do? How did you rebuild? Obviously, we know you took the time to evaluate what makes you happy, what you need, but how did you rebuild yourself and get yourself in a secure place to then kind of start doing those things?
So this is what I mean by perspective. I remember when all this was playing out, and it was probably one of the darkest times in my life. Uh and if you ask my friends and my family, I was probably the worst version of myself at that point. But I look back at it now and it needed to happen. Had that not have happened, I wouldn't be where I am experiencing and living the life that I am. And that's what I mean. You can have that perspective of why me, why does this happen to me, and why do all the shit things happen? Or you can have the perspective that it's a blessing, there's a lesson, there's a reason. You can't see it yet, because you can't see the bigger picture. But I just think had I kept going down that path, I don't know if I'd be here today. So it was a blessing that all of that happened. Basically what had happened, I had it for a few years, just a really, really unfortunate living circumstance. Like I just could not catch a freaking break. And my mum and I at the time were on and off. It was a really tumultuous relationship. We'd go months without talking. We'd send a text here and there, just yeah. And I had to move out. She sold the house. I had to move out, and I think I was 20 or something at that age, and I'd only been with my partner for like 2 months. And so then I moved into his house. That didn't work out. I had to move in with my brother. And then I decided to move in with a friend. And then kid you not, a week after moving in with that friend, she decided that she was going to get rid of the lease. So then I moved back in with my brother. Then I moved in with my partner. We got our own place. That was my first like own lease. And then we moved, I think, like another 2 times. And then COVID hit. We had a crazy dispute with our landlord over the premises we were living in. We had to go live with my ex's boss. And then that's when we broke up, and I was living in my ex's boss's house. My ex had just bought his own place. He moved into that, and then I moved in with my dad. So when I say I had unfortunate living circ, I think I moved maybe like 9 or 10 times within 12 months or 18 months. It was quite literally the most taxing, exhausting thing. And one thing I've learned is when you don't have somewhere to call home, everything in life feels incredibly unstable,
Yes.
unsecure. You lack that control. And I think as well, one thing with bodybuilding was because I was in control of my diet, of my weight, of that regimented life and schedule and routine gave me what I couldn't get in any other part of my life, whether it was a relationship with my parents, whether it was money, whether it was living circumstance. I was just lacking control in all sense. And then when me and my ex broke up, it was a really, really heartbreaking breakup. And it was my first breakup as well. So it hit me like a rock, as I imagine all breakups do. But like I said earlier, I was also in such a bad place mentally, and I wasn't aware. And then I moved in, I went and stayed with my dad. And I started working with a life coach. And I remember for a few weeks, the biggest challenge on a day-to-day basis was finding a reason to stay around, was finding a reason to keep living life. And I remember saying to my life coach and to my psychologist, I can't do it anymore. I can't live. I can't, it's not for me. The thought of having to live life for the next 80 years is crippling. I cannot be here for that long. And then that's when we got a doctor involved. We did some, assessments and evaluations, and I got diagnosed with severe clinical depression, and I got medicated immediately. And obviously I started doing both the medical work with a psychologist, but also I guess a more mindful approach as well with a life coach. And it's funny because I've always been a bit of like a pessimist, I guess, like, oh, psychologists, life coaches, ooh, like, but I'd got into a point where obviously what I was doing was not working. I could not remember a time in my life, in my 20 years of living, that I felt happy. And so I was like, I will do anything. I'd started meditating, I'd started yoga, I started journaling, I had little coloring in books. So when I felt anxious, I'd color in. Like I was doing like podcasts, everything I could to turn my life around. I became infatuated with changing the way I existed. And I saw the frequency that my life coach existed at, and I found that incredibly inspiring. And so I just, like with everything that I do, if I do it, I'm doing it 100%, and with focus and with drive and with work ethic. And that's what I became obsessed with, was changing my life. And I knew that there was, you do have to be responsible for the role you play in your own suffering. So I think a first part was recognizing that there's no one else responsible for the way my life, like obviously things can happen and unfortunate things can happen, but how you choose to respond to them and what you do with those experiences is entirely up to you, And I think there also has to be, for change to occur, there has to be an openness to being wrong. And I was like, Philippa, usually if it's you against the world, it's probably just you against yourself. Like there's nothing wrong with the world. It's you. So it was a lot of evaluating and self-awareness and going, what you've been doing for the past 20 years isn't working. So why don't you change it up? And that's kind of how I stayed with my dad for a bit. I moved in with my uncle for a bit as well. My dad and his partner split up, so I had to move out. I went and lived with my uncle for a little bit. I'd saved really, really hard, and then I finally got my own place. And a lot of people as well asked why, like my friends were like, just move in with someone, it'll be cheaper. And it was that whole, I guess that PTSD from my living situation, always riding on the coattails of other people. I was like, I need my own lease with my name on it that nobody else can affect other than me. And I knew that, yes, it might be more financially viable to live with someone or to have a roommate, but it had to be something that I did for myself. And so I did that. I moved into my own place for the first time in my life, living by myself. I decked it out in like hot pink. There's Barbie pictures everywhere. Every single thing in my apartment is hot pink. And I made it my safe space. And I turned my life into a life I wanted to be living. And I gave myself grace as well, because I was becoming a version of myself that I hadn't been before. And that was an experience in itself. And I'm always evolving, and I still have days where I want to work on myself, and days, when I'm, a little bit sassy or whatnot to my partner. And I'm like, Philippa, don't go back into that space. It's progress isn't linear. Um, so yeah, it's an ongoing evolution, and I'm constantly evolving. But I just know that I've worked so incredibly hard to come back from so many setbacks in my life. And I think that's why I feel that reward, because my trophies and stuff look great on my shelf, but take them away, I'm still the same Philippa. I still hold as much value. If I decide to wake up tomorrow and not bodybuild, I'm still just as important as I was today. I still am just as valuable. I still have just as much meaning in my life and purpose. I'm still going to be loved the same amount by my friends and family. And I guess that's something that I've built for myself.
I just know there's someone listening who's in the position you were in. Like, I just know that. And I'm glad that you're sharing this, because what I found personally too is like when I hear other women's stories of resilience and overcoming and pushing through, it gives me a lot of that courage or hope that that's possible for me too. So you being so open about these experiences, from moving so many times and going through very challenging, unstable circumstances, and then establishing your independence, learning about yourself, finding a life that's worth living, and recognizing also that in doing that, you're strengthening a version of you that hasn't yet existed in the world. And I sometimes think about change, and I'm like, when I think about change anyways, I go, well, there's pathways that we were used to taking, and then there's pathways we're trying to start taking. And the more we take these pathways, the more likely we will be to continue to take them. But it doesn't mean this pathway doesn't still exist. And it doesn't mean we may not ever choose to go down it. And so that helps me to have compassion for myself or others as well, when I'm like, oh, kind of like going back to this old way of thinking. Even if 95% of my thinking lately has been this pathway that's good and reasonable and more aligned with what I desire, there's that little pathway that sometimes is like you just slip down it because it's still there. But it's that conscious effort. You said it's that consistency. It's choosing that over and over and over again, and then having grace with yourself when maybe you don't always go the way you intend.
It's funny you mention that, because this is the thing. I can sit here and preach and share my story, but I don't want people to think that I don't have my bad days. There were definitely days in prep where I was crying and I was like, why am I doing this?
Right.
Like, not all sunshine and rainbows. And I will never convey that image because it's not accurate and it's misleading. And most recently, I'm talking maybe about a month ago, like recent, I was at the gym, I had mental breakdown. It was just 5 a.m.
Yep.
I was in hysterics and I had to walk out of the gym and go sit in my car. And I'm in this difficult transitional period where I love law. I love law. I love studying. It's a career I want later on. But I've been thrown this curveball where there's this possibility I could make a living as being a pro athlete, and I want to be in America. I want to move there. I want to be competing. I want to be spending my day in the gym, posing, go home, eat, make some content, go to bed. I want that to be my job, to be an athlete, and that's not where I'm at the moment. The fact of the matter is, I have to show up to my 9 to 5 office job. I have to be surrounded by people that I don't necessarily click with anymore and don't share the same mindset with. I have a lot of respect for the people that I work with, but at the end of the day, they're not athletes, they're not bodybuilders, they're not who I'm identifying with at the moment. And I still have to show up to this job because I have to pay my rent and I have to buy my chicken and rice with some money. I have to, pay my coach, this and that. Like, it's hard because I want to step more into the realm of being a pro athlete, but I'm stuck in my old life before I was. And so there's this disconnect and friction in my life at the moment, and I just have been struggling with almost an identity crisis at the moment. And I was speaking to my life coach, and I was like, I'm really waking up every morning feeling tired, feeling heavy. I'm crying for no reason. And I was like, I'm back in that space. I've lost that appreciation, that gratitude, the presentness, the peacefulness. And she was like, you haven't lost that. You have operated a certain way for 20 something years. That is your default. Every day when you wake up as your new version of Philippa, that is a conscious effort to apply those mechanisms and those actions and those behaviors and those thought processes that you've learned in the past 18 months. That is not your default. So of course it's going to be easier to slip into those old habits, those old ways of thinking. That's not a bad thing. This is exactly what I mean. It's perspective. This is a reminder that you do not want to go back there. When you feel like this, it makes you take a moment and makes you reset, and it goes, okay, we're back in what I used to be like. I don't want to stay here. I need to start journaling more. I need to slow down and maybe take a breath. I need to go connect with nature and place my feet on the grass and feel a little bit more grounded. I need to speak to my loved ones, whatever it is to get you back to that new version of you, that better version of you. Sometimes you do need a reminder, and like I said, give yourself grace, because my default has been angry, abrupt, miserable, low. Like, that has been my life for 20 something years. So you can't, it's unrealistic to think that the old version of me doesn't exist, because the new version and this better version of me wouldn't be who she is without that old version. She's just as important and valuable. She's a part of the story, and we can't disregard or discredit her purpose, because she did serve a purpose.
Exactly. And likely a very meaningful purpose, and one that's contributed to this version of you coming to
Yeah.
life. And you wouldn't have it, like you said, if you hadn't experienced that. It's kind of like there's this theory called IFS, so it's internal family systems, and it's that we are not one thing, we're like a sum of parts. And I really appreciate that perspective, because I think it's one that fosters compassion, because you're able to see that, okay, I'm not saying I got to get rid of this part of me. instead I'm saying like I can embrace it, recognize it, see what purpose it serves, and allow it to play a new role in my life. And you had mentioned earlier too, control was a big deal because you didn't have it. So you were seeking it through competing really at the time. And you had been going back to back with shows. And then when you went through all of this, you took the time to build your metaphorical house and find yourself more. And then when you re-entered competing, the thing that stood out was you said that it's because you wanted to know you didn't let it go away from your life because someone else took it or because of circumstances. You wanted to know for certain that this was something you wanted to pursue or not pursue. So you went from not knowing if this is what you want to do to now seeing a potential career path as a professional athlete in this. So that is a major identity shift because you really immersed yourself into the, okay, I'm going to study law and I'm going to find who I am and I'm going to, and then it's like, wow, I let myself go open this door and look at all this space that's been revealed to me, this possibility.
Yeah, I think, so many girls message me, and I feel incredibly blessed when girls reach out to me and just even take the time. Like I value everything so much. The thought of someone typing my name in to Instagram, clicking on my profile, clicking on the message button, taking the time, like every part of what's come my way, I'm so grateful for. And so many girls message me saying, you're living proof that I can do it all and that I don't have to give up work or this or that to be successful. And I think a massive thing with bodybuilding is right now I'm moving in the direction of my life trajectory is going in a way that I'm like, I think maybe I could do this. Maybe I could be a pro athlete. Maybe I could be the first Australian to ever win Olympia. Like, I turned pro in ICN in my first year, then IFBB in my first season. Maybe I'm kind of good at this. Like, it's an imposter syndrome thing. I'm like, weird, is this a coincidence? Like, could I actually do this?
Right.
But in saying that, if I decide I don't want to bodybuild tomorrow, that's my prerogative. But what am I going to do as a person,
Yeah.
So my being can't be bodybuilding in itself. I do recognize, and I'm able to recognize, it's just who I choose to be today. But who I choose to be tomorrow is a completely different story. And I don't want to sideswipe law. I did not go through the exams and the study and completely disregard law. I know that there will come a time and a place where it serves its purpose. Right now, I'm still dancing professionally. I love it. I dance every week. I'm so incredibly blessed with my boss and the opportunity she gives me. Um, so that's I describe myself as a trail mix. You know how in trail mix you have like bits of chocolate, you have peanuts, you have sunflower seed. That's who I am. I have everything going on. I'm a student. I work in a law firm. I work as a professional dancer at night. I bodybuild. Like, I love to see my friends. I love to bake and cook. I want to write a dessert book. There's so many things and facets and components that make up Philippa. And it is hard because right now I'm really feeling I'm being pulled in one direction more so than the others. But I also remind myself that, Philippa, you cannot be only a bodybuilder, because at the end of the day, bodybuilding is just something I do. It's not who I am. And I think it's really important. You do see girls that their whole entire existence is consumed by bodybuilding, and that's where I become wary and cautious. And I think you do need to proceed with caution. It's like, what happens if, God forbid, what happens if you have an accident tomorrow and you can never walk again?
Exactly.
What happens when you can't bodybuild? That's when you have an identity crisis. Your being cannot be what you do. It's just a part of you. It just so happens that right now that pathway is I'm feeling a very, very strong sense to fulfill and to pursue wholeheartedly. And it is hard because fact of the matter is, like I said, you got to pay bills, you got to pay rent, I have to pay my gym membership. So you got to do a job in the meantime until you're there. I have to find a sponsor in the States to visas are hard. I don't want to just be going to the States every year. I want to live there. I want to be in the environment. I want to be surrounded by my competitors and working with the best in the business. But I think, yeah, it's very important that I remind myself, Philippa, at the end of the day, bodybuilding is just something that you do, and there is so much more to you than bodybuilding. Your value you will not change should you wake up tomorrow and never want to do it again, because that also takes the pressure off, and it also ensures that I'm bodybuilding for the right reason, not because there's an expectation of other people that I be a pro athlete.
Yes. I'm loving everything you're saying so much because the value piece and not over identifying with being a bodybuilder as like that's what makes you important or worthy or valuable or beautiful or whatever it might be.
Mm.
That's so key. And not even and that's not even just bodybuilding. That's like your career, what you do, what you focus on. Being careful
Yeah,
not to identify with that is the message I'm hearing you say, and knowing that your worthiness and value is far beyond what is seen on the surface. And
absolutely.
knowing that you have these many different avenues you could pursue, that's very life-giving. That's so
Yeah,
awesome because you're like, oh, well, no matter what I actually do, I'll likely be okay. And I remember when I was so committed to playing volleyball in college, and that was like all I focused on.
yeah,
My identity was volleyball player, and like sort of forgot how to have fun with it. And as
yeah.
a result, I think I burnt out. And then when I actually fell in love with fitness, it was I had already committed to go play college volleyball somewhere. And I was like, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. But that identity crisis was so hard in my life. And I remember my mom told me something. She said, she's like, you don't have to do this just because you thought you would. And that message really hit home for me because I had put all this weight in. Well, my parents paid for club volleyball. I've been doing this for I've been doing this because everyone thinks I'm going to be this college volleyball player. It's been important. I've led the teams. I've got these accolades. And that's how I am. That's who I am. But when I step back, it's like, no, like it's okay if I'm being called to fitness right now. And that set me up to compete, and that set me up to personal development and writing a book and then psychology. And so none of it could have happened if I had said, no, I'm going to stay in this thing because I told myself this is what I was going to do. So even just the fact that your mind is open to these other possibilities and you're dreaming about it and you could identify plans for each is so amazing. And when you say you want to live in the States too, like being someone who lives in the States, it's so
And
it's
and
so
I'm American. I'm like,
it's just so cool because I'm like, it's perspective, right? Like I'm here, I could be immersed in it. I enjoy it. It's amazing. And we could take it for granted. And so when you say that, I want so badly to know what you envision and how that's different from your life now. So like what is it you envision in the States versus like what's happening currently?
um, for me, living in the States has always been the goal. Obviously, I wanted to be a professional dancer. And I think in Australia is an incredible country. There's no other country I would want to live in or raise a family long term. I think we're very, very incredibly blessed here. But in terms of opportunity, it has a lot of shortcomings. Australia has really, really bad tall poppy syndrome. So it's like you're almost frowned upon for being an overachiever. It's not, people don't find it inspiring, they find it threatening.
Mm.
And when, it was the same thing in dance class. It was a really toxic dance industry in Australia. You'd be one of the best in class, and people are standing on the side talking negatively about you, as opposed to standing there going, oh my God, like she's amazing and da 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 da. And whenever I would go and dance, I've danced in New York, I've danced in LA, I've danced in London, like I've trained all over. Um, and anytime I was in that dance environment, I was always starting at the bottom, because the caliber of dancers is so, it's everyone around the world goes to LA to train. And so the caliber is incredible, but I felt the most comfortable dancing in LA and New York, because you guys have this thing where you see someone good and it's like, oh my God, like you're incredible, like you killed that, like you,
In
and
that
it's like, oh,
accent too, by the way.
it's like, oh my God, why are they acknowledging that? Like, oh, it's weird. It's like, oh, like they're so encouraging. Oh, they encourage greatness and uniqueness and to stand out. Wow, this is really cool. And I feel like in terms of opportunity, America just does everything bigger and better. Your athletes, the money that's available to be made, the competitiveness, the opportunity, everything is in America. Unfortunately, Australia is so far from the rest of the world as well. How I envision my life is, obviously it changed from wanting to go to America to dance to wanting to go to America to compete. I love, like I said earlier, I love the process of competing. And it would be a dream to find myself in a position where I'm able to compete as a pro athlete, and that is my job. My income streams are through way of sponsorship, endorsement, uh, prize money, living the athlete life, not because of the fame and the finance and this and that to be made, more so because I would love the thought of getting up and the only things that I have to do during the day is apply myself as an athlete. It's not I have to do cardio before my 9 to 5 job, then I have to go do weights after my 9 to 5. You know, it's hard to give 100% in prep when in reality, you also have to meet your normal life needs. So the dream would be to find myself in a position where I'm competing and that's my job. I wake up, I do my posing for hours, I do my cardio for hours, I train for hours, I cook and prep my food. Like that's all that's on my plate, because then you can give every fiber of your being to a show and to be able to compete year round. Like in Australia, we have 2 seasons. So you can either compete in April or you can compete in October. Take your pick. Pro shows, we don't really have them. So in order to compete as a pro, we have to go overseas. It would be insane to be like, should I do a show in 2 weeks? Yeah,
Right.
why not? Should I do a show next weekend? Yeah, but like to just have shows at your disposal to do, to be on stage, to practice, you know, this, that, and then to qualify for the Olympia. Like for us, qualifying for the Olympia, it has to be strategically thought out. When are we going to fly over? How many shows are we going to be able to do? How much money do we have to take us while we're not working? Because, you know, we have to leave our day jobs for 3 months. So to be in America and to have just show after show after show an opportunity to qualify for the Olympia would be incredible. And then obviously getting that qualification. And then I'm going to take it one step further, just because why not dream big, win Olympia? I want to be Miss Olympia.
Love that. I love that we just got your dream painted. And given everything you've already accomplished, who's to say you couldn't accomplish that, right?
I
And
know it's hard as well, because I have moments where I'm like, it's not actually going to happen. Like Philippa, it's like the equivalent of you dreaming that you wanted to dance for Beyonce. Like the likelihood of it is never going to happen. And then I have moments when I'm like, why the fuck not? Why
right,
not? Why can't it happen? Make it happen. Don't sit there
exactly.
and negatively talk. Like the only people that are going to criticize you for dreaming big are those that are dreaming smaller than you. The only people that are going to criticize you for doing too much are those that are usually doing less.
Mm-hmm.
Just do it. Like, go for it, girl. So it's hard. It kind of seems so far-fetched, but then yeah, I also remind myself, I'm like, you did things that no Australian bikini athlete has done. Like, why not be the first Australian bikini athlete to become Miss Olympia?
That'd be epic.
Yeah, it would be a dream.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just seeing your happiness too while you talk about it is so beautiful. And I know that you love dancing, and I know that you have a great life where you are, but I also love that you let yourself dream, because I think sometimes people who do have like the tall poppy syndrome, or who do feel like their dreams aren't worth pursuing, they learn to just accept what is. And while that's great to have gratitude and contentment, I think that's very, very important, doesn't mean that you should put a stop on dreaming or a stop on growing or seeking even more for and from yourself and to give. And I was actually curious because everything you just described, from right now, you can't just be athlete mode. There's other things going on in your life. Specifically, the dancing is what really stands out to me, because I'm like, how do you navigate the physical demands of dancing for work while also prepping? Because I imagine you're probably dancing late nights into early mornings. Like, it's not like that conducive to a great healthy sleep cycle, or at least I'm imagining this. So walk us through what that looks like.
Um, it was crazy. So I would work so I would go train from like 4 a.m. to 7 in the morning.
Uh-huh.
And then I would go to my day job in the law firm, 8:30 to 5:30. Then I'd usually have to come home, do my other hour of cardio, till about 7:30. And then I would rush home, get ready for work, like my dancing job, do my makeup, and then I'd be at my dancing job at 9 p.m. And then I would dance until 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And then I'd get home. I'd usually sleep for an hour, and then I'd go back and do that all again. So that was like my Thursday, Fridays. And then I usually would dance Saturdays as well. I think the hardest part was making the the food that I was on from,
That's what
Monday.
I was wondering.
Yes, or Sunday to Wednesday, uh, last 24 hours as opposed to 14 hours, which is a normal day. And I didn't get any extra meals. I didn't get um, anything extra. My dancing never counted towards my cardio. I still did the same cardio on those days that I had to. It was hard. It was really hard in the last few weeks as well. I found dancing brought me a lot of anxiety in the last few weeks. Like, I would be in tears to my boyfriend on the way to Ivy, because I was like, I can't do it. I can't physically do it. Like, even we're in heels for 5, 6 hours. We're not dancing the whole time, but even like you said, just the late nights, it was incredibly taxing. Um, I was just frail. You have like you're dragging your feet and stuff like that, and then to get on stage and have to like smash out this dancing, like I would come off and I'd be exhausted. But my boss at Ivy, Beck, shout out to Beck if you're listening. She was so supportive, especially like with how I was looking, because I was looking so lean
Yeah.
in those costumes. And like, let's be honest, you don't want to see that in a costume. You want to see a girl with a juicy butt and some on her doing her thing. But she always, and especially when I became really vascular, she would just change the costumes up. So she'd have my arms covered. She was just so willing to work with me. She would always put me in, like, if there was an earlier group that would finish half an hour earlier, she'd put me in that group knowing that I could get half an hour more sleep. I took my meals. Everyone would sit and eat there, as a collective, because there's usually about 10 of us on. Everyone would be eating their chocolates and their lollies and their snacks and their pizzas, and I'd just be sitting there with my chicken and rice. And nobody judged me. Nobody ever would make a comment. I'd walk in, they'd go, Phil, how's competing? How are you feeling? Everyone was so supportive. The girls at Ivy as well. That's where I dance. When I did compete, they all got together and streamed it. Like it was just, I know it was so special. And I like finished my Queensland show and I see on Instagram, everyone had got together without telling me and watching it. And
Yeah.
I thought, like, how blessed, how incredible is that? Like I'm surrounded by the most amazing people. But yeah, it was hard. It was definitely hard. But at the end of the day, like it's my job and it's a significant portion of my income. And the fact of the matter is I couldn't afford to not dance.
Right.
So that's that's what I mean. As hard as it is, it would have been harder explaining to my landlord why I can't pay rent.
Yeah.
So I had to keep, I think I only had the week before my show off. I think that's probably the only week I took off. Like I was dancing the entire prep.
One of those like it wasn't a choice you were making necessarily. It was a choice to compete and put yourself through that, but you still had to work. And I think sometimes that's often like a misconception with this sport as well, in the pursuit of this is like you don't get to necessarily drop everything and just compete. You have to have like stable finances in place and then make sure you can maintain that to support the journey, especially because when you start, I think, performing well as a competitor and you want to go to the next show and then the next show, you want to prepare ahead of time for that if that's the goal.
Yeah, you have to fund it. Like
Yeah.
that's it's I mean, I'm sure when you get to a certain level, there's brands and stuff that are I don't know how it works. I'm not there. I'm not that significant yet. But the fact of the matter is how are you going to pay for your bikini? How are you going to pay for your rent? How are you going to pay for your food? How are you going to pay for your creatine and your BCAAs and your coach and your comp fees? Like it has to get paid for. I don't live with my parents. I'm not financially independent and have been for as long as I can remember. And I just don't have that luxury of having disposable money. So I had to work. Like it was a non-negotiable as much as cardio was
Right.
or eating my chicken and rice. Like it was just a necessity for me to
Exactly.
continue life. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes like when people are like, "Oh, how did you manage this and this and this?" It's like, I had to. I
I had to.
couldn't not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how I did it mentally is a very different story, but
Yeah.
like how I it was necessity. So I get that. And when you talk about like the actual demands of it too, and you have all this support, which is amazing. Thank goodness for that. But I'm trying to go through this timeline in my head of you, the girl who loved dancing and grew up dancing and wanted to dance for Beyonce in the future, to also competing. So when did competing enter the chat essentially?
So when COVID hit, I obviously the dance industry took a massive hit and there was no longer shows, there was no auditions, there was no open classes. I really my life had just been put on hold.
Yeah.
And I had a one-way ticket in 2020 to move to London that I'd already purchased. So that the plan was already set in stone. I was moving to London to pursue dancing. And then COVID hit in March. We all went into lockdown, and my ticket was to go in June. Lost the money to that ticket, didn't end up getting over there. And when we were coming out of COVID, obviously the dance industry and the entertainment industry was still well underwater. But everything was kind of getting back up and running aside from the entertainment industry. And competing was one of those things that shows were back on. And someone had just come up to me at the gym and asked, "Are you competing?" And I was like, "Am I what? Competing for what?" And they were like, "Bodybuilding." And I was like, "What is that?" And then I searched it. I was like, "Bikini bodybuilding, what is this?" And then I saw, oh, they've got cute little costumes on, they've got makeup on, they've got heels on, there's spotlights, there's music. Oh, this pretty similar to dancing. Yeah, I'll give this a go. It was almost like my next avenue to get on stage and perform. And I was already training in the gym. I loved training. So I just thought, yeah, I mean, if this is the next best thing that I can get to dancing, then I'll do it for the meantime. And then lo and behold, it just stuck. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, okay. Now I got it because I was curious how that unfolded. Now, I'll kind of go through this, like the gruelingness of your prep. You had shared that, at least in some of the posts that I had read from you, like you've had negative or concerning and grueling preps before, but this one was, although it was demanding, it felt safer. You had a lot of trust in your coach, Troy. So what are the things that a competitor can look for or pay attention to know if a prep is grueling and demanding but not safe, or grueling and demanding but also safe?
Um, so things like it's hard. Things like loss of period is obviously a red flag. It's common and it's hard because like a lot of normal people are like, oh, but doesn't that always happen? I'm like, look, it's common, but it doesn't mean that it's
Healthy.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that it's healthy. It still should be taken as a red flag. Um, I guess especially coming out of prep, your relationship with food, binge eating, stuff like that. If you're communicating to your coach that you're struggling, like I had told my coach that I wanted to be medicated, my ex-coach, sorry, that I wanted to be medicated because I was really struggling with mental health. And she was like, no, it's going to interfere with your metabolism. You cannot take any things like that. Like when your coach should be able to hear you and go, your mental health's not doing great. Maybe this isn't the time to compete. Hair loss as well, actually. When I was competing with my ex-coach, my hair was falling out like there was no tomorrow. That's a massive sign. Even I actually became really quite, this is so weird, really quite hairy on my body.
Yes. Yeah.
And I remember seeing a doctor about it, and they explained it's actually a physiological response of your body. It's a safety thing that when you get incredibly skinny and undernourished, your body starts to grow hair to keep it warm and protect it. And a lot of people with anorexia and eating disorders develop that. Things as well, like I'd actually lost my hunger cues. This is all with my ex-coach, by the way, not with Troy, not with Troy. I'd lost my hunger cues. So I was eating in my last prep with her. I hate saying numbers. I think it's dangerous when you throw out calories and cardio counts, but I was eating about 700 calories with her, and I was probably like 12 weeks out from show. And my body weight had just not moved at all. And considering I was eating like 700 calories, I was like not hungry at
Right.
all. And I remember going to the doctor, and because she was concerned as to why I wasn't hungry either, because that's like really weird. And the doctor actually said, when your body's been starved for such a prolonged period, which I was coming up to 2 years competing back to back, hunger is a safety signal. Hunger tells your body, I need food. And when your body starts to realize when it's sending that signal and nothing's happening, it's not getting food, it just stops sending the signal. It's why cause yourself pain, because when nothing's happening when we send this signal. So considering I was eating 700 calories, I was like not hungry at all. And I was like, this is mad. Like, let's drop it to 500. Like, I don't need food. Things like that, I think are extremely concerning. I think, yes, hunger is normal to be felt. Loss of period does happen quite often, but it's important that you communicate these things with your coach so they're able to evaluate, you know, if it's one or two side effects, maybe we keep pushing. If you're experiencing all these things, maybe you're really not functioning at a healthy level and we need to pull the plug on it. Like I would hope that your coach knows more than you and is better experienced and better educated to make that call and make that judgment. But I just felt with all these things happening, and I was telling my ex-coach, her main concern was getting me on stage because I was a meal ticket. Like, as long as I was competing, she had that weekly money coming in. I was paying her rent. With Troy, I feel like had I, for some reason, had I been like to him, I don't want to do it anymore, or I'm having this problem, I'm having that problem, or say I wasn't lean enough, he would be the first person to say, that's fine, let's not compete, because he doesn't need me as a client. He's so well established. He has so many girls. He now has the privilege of choosing who he wants to work with. Like, he is not riding on me paying his weekly bills.
Right.
So yeah, he's not gaining anything out of pushing me on stage and pushing me through the prep and making me finish it regardless of where my health is at. You know, health always comes first. And that's also a massive reason why he encouraged me to take this year off. Obviously, he wanted me to grow, so that it was strategic in terms of my physique. But he goes, you were in such a long prep that I also want you to be human. He goes, if you want to be in the competing game for the long haul and you want to qualify for Olympia, you need to make it sustainable. And you've clearly learned, Philippa, that doing back-to-back seasons is, to a degree, not sustainable. He was like, I want you to have Easter with your family, have Christmas with your family, enjoy your birthday, be present with your friends, take this year to grow. But then you can also take this year to, you know, kind of like replenish the need for social connection and to be human. That's as simple as it is, to eat food, to go out and get a coffee with almond milk. Crazy. Like,
Yeah.
to do those mundane things, you know, to go to the movies and actually eat popcorn instead of my chicken and rice. And he goes, and then once you take that year off, you'll feel ready for stage. Like, you'll want to get back on rather than being in that headspace of, I only have 2 weeks left until I'm in prep again. What can I eat? Do you get me? Like, he just has the healthiest approach. And even like, I still get scared going to him. Oh, like, I went out this weekend and I had Macca's and I got really drunk with my friends. I wasn't planning on drinking, but I did. And then I got Macca's. And I get scared of, you know, being that young 20-year-old girl that went out with her friends and had a night out. And he's like, yeah, no problem. It's all good. I'm glad to hear that you had a great weekend. You probably could have used the extra food anyway. So we'll just get straight back into things this week. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, he fully gets that as much as I am an athlete, I am a human being. Like, I do need to do normal things. Otherwise, that resentment for the sport can start to build. And I think that is a perfect picture of balance and what a healthy coach looks like, both healthy physically, but also healthy mentally. Like, he harnesses his clients' health.
Yeah, and he's not promoting an unhealthy approach after the fact. Like, if you said, "Oh yeah, I told him that, and then he told me to do extra cardio and hit the
Yeah,
gym."
100%. Yes.
Mhm.
If anything, he goes to me, oh, your metabolism's probably in a great spot then. Let's increase your food. And I'm like, oh,
Yep.
okay.
I love that.
And it's funny because I've been working with him for over a year, obviously doing an off season. This is my first time doing an off season with him. So it's still a new experience, but like, he surprises me every day. And I always say to him, I'm like, you know, if you ever think like my body fat's getting too high, like, you can let me know. I don't have to have a cheat meal out every week. Like, you can tell me, I'll rein it in. He's like, yeah, no, it's all good. It's like not that deep. It's all good. Just keep,
Yeah,
he's
exactly.
like, just train hard. I'm like, okay.
I
Am
think
I
it's so
being a bad pro? He's like, it's
right.
fine. He's like, just train hard. It's all good. Like, he's so nonchalant. He's very logical.
That's
He
good.
lives the professional aspect, and he's just able to look at, you know, as long as you're training hard, as long as you're doing the work that needs to be done, it's fine. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And I've never had that experience with a coach before, you know, so it's a blessing, and it's just pleasant being able to work with him. And I'm just incredibly grateful for the experience he's given me as an athlete in prep, but also as an athlete out of prep. Because like I said, the off season is still, this is my first experience with him in terms of that. And yeah, he's just been a very influential figure in my life since we started working together. So I'm very, very grateful for him.
Yeah, it sounds like he's done amazing, and being able to provide an athlete a great prep experience, I think doesn't speak as loudly as providing an athlete a great improvement season experience, specifically, especially their first one, their first good improvement. Because I've had different experiences myself too. And what I like is when a coach is so oriented towards your long-term success. And as you said, they're not so emotionally invested in it, like, oh, you're a terrible athlete. Da, 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 da. Instead, they're like, well, what's going to help this person be the best athlete? And also, why are we taking this thing so seriously? Even my coach, he's like, oh my gosh, I'll go to him and I'll be like, "So this is what's going on." And then he's like, "Okay, like I didn't even know you weren't having a refeed meal every week. Like what have we
Yeah.
been doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, I just don't care about it." He's like, "What?" And so he's adding more food, or if he's pushing, and so it's good when you can have that open line of communication, and then your coach has a response that allows for that open line of
Yes.
communication to continue. It creates a really healthy coaching relationship. Whereas I think those other ones, like you had previously described, can create a dependent or codependent coaching relationship, and one where you're seeking the coach's validation, you're seeking the coach to tell you exactly what to do, you're reliant on them. Whereas the type of situation you're in now, you're gaining self-efficacy, you're gaining insight for your body, you're gaining insight as an athlete that's actually breeding more trust and more data for you and your coach to be like, hey, we actually do really good when we have an improvement season like this.
That's what I mean. Like Troy and I guess it's a two-way street. We obviously work incredibly well. Like we get each other. We're just a good team. But he's created a space where if I do, like I've had weekends where, I'm like, oh, it's so and so's birthday and we're going out to a club. And then I got drunk and I got 6 chicken nuggets on the way home. And then the next morning I woke up and went got an acai bowl. And then my friend spontaneously wanted to come over and have pizza. And then I've just not eaten on track. And instead of him creating a relationship where I feel like I can't tell him that,
Right.
on Monday morning I check in, I'm like, I had this, and he's like, okay, cool. And it's his job as the coach to make a plan according to what I've done, not, you know, penalize me, make me feel self-conscious for coming forward to him. Like I can only imagine that there's girls that are hiding things and are
Yeah.
stressing and are not being honest. He's created a space where I can just be upfront with him and go, I ate this, or, I didn't eat out this weekend. And it's like, okay, sweet. I jump on the scale weight and I see my scale weight is going up and I'm like, oh shit. And I message him, I'm like, oh, scale weight's up a kilo. And he's like, oh, it's all good, like no stress. And that kind of puts in my brain, okay, I can be honest with him. I can be open with him. He's done a very, very good job at creating that space. So props to him. But like you said, it's that open line of communication from both ends where I'm also honest with him.
Yeah.
And he's not seeing the scale weight go up and me go, no, I'm not having anything off track. And him going, oh, are you sure? And me like, yeah, nothing. Like I'm also being honest with him and owning it. Yeah, I did go out on the weekend, or I did eat this, or I did go on a date night with my partner. And he's like, okay, sweet. So I think there's that mutual respect for each other's role in the relationship.
Yes. So important. And to expand on that too, I think you had mentioned earlier you had struggled in the past with bulimia, binge eating. When you have a history of any sort of disordered eating, of course, you don't want your coach to always treat you like you're this disorder, but you need to, I think, invest in and make sure you're working with a coach who can understand to some extent that a punishing, resentful, critical
very strict type of approach, especially like year round, is not necessarily beneficial for someone coming from that experience too.
Yeah, 100%. It's a very delicate topic, and Troy is a great advocate for mental health. He always encourages people to see, and his athletes to see psychologists. You know, people ask him on Instagram, like, what do you think's best for my depression? And he's like, see a psychologist, like he's such an advocate for that. But it's hard because naturally I default to, I'll see my scale weight go up and I'm like, Troy, like, should I be doing an hour of cardio? Like, and I'll go and do an hour cardio naturally because I'm like, oh my God, I shouldn't have eaten that. Because it's easy to fall back into that relationship with food. And I'll be like to him, weight's up, but I did an hour of cardio. And he's like, yeah, it's probably best we don't do that. And it's like, oh, but I was worried my weight was up. He's like, that it's fine, but let's not do an hour cardio because it's not going to help our metabolism. Like, it's only creating a deficit that we can't continue. We don't want to be in a deficit right now. But it's I think as well, having a coach in an off season keeps me accountable. And the way me and my ex-coach would work was I'd usually get like 6 or 8 weeks between seasons, and I would put on anywhere between 10 to 15 kilos in those 6 to 8 weeks because I was just binge eating day and night, because I knew that like I had to go back into prep in a short time. So it's like, get your hands on everything that you can eat, Philippa. Whereas, and I wouldn't ever check in with her in those 6 to 8 weeks. I didn't see her. I didn't pay for the off season. There was no off season, right? Yeah, I think going into this off season with Troy, seeing him every week, checking in with him every week, it keeps me accountable. Having a structured training program. I choose to follow a meal plan over macros. I just find it easier. It's less time consuming. If I want to have something different, then I can work it in by choice. But for the most part, I just have my little chicken and rice meals. And that has worked for me, having that routine and not coming out of prep and just not having a coach, not deciding to do an off season. It was hard as well because money wise, this was before turning pro, obviously. I didn't know whether to do an off season properly or just hit him up again after, after a little bit of time off, because the fact of the matter is I was struggling to pay week to week. And I knew that I had to save, and any spare money that I have is going towards my coaching. And it was making it really hard on a day-to-day basis to meet, my electricity bills and my groceries and this and that. And so I was umming and ahhing, and even mum said, you do need to save, da da da. And then I turned pro and I went, well, obviously doing an unstructured off season is only just regressing, and that's not the behavior of a pro athlete, and it's an investment. And let me tell you, it was the best investment I could have ever made. As much as it is great for my physical health and my physique, mentally, I'm not struggling with an eating disorder. Not to say that I haven't had times where I've overeaten, and I've been honest with him. I'll be like, Troy, like, I've been really bad this week. And he's like, it's okay. Like, but it gives me that accountability. It's almost a safety mechanism as well. And it just gives me routine. I know what I have to do in the gym. I have a new goal, which is to grow and to train hard and to have energy. It just allows my goals to shift from a state of stepping on stage to, okay, now me and my coach are working to grow. We want to build our glutes. We want to build our shoulders. But when you go into an off season completely unstructured, I feel like that's when things kind of get thrown out. You don't have a purpose. You don't have goals. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know why you're doing it. There's no intention there. And that's when things can become really dangerous. Your mental health spirals, your physical health spirals. So working with Troy now, in a different phase of my journey has been just as important, if not more so, than the prep itself.
Yeah, it is so important. And I love that you were able to come to that decision for yourself and you were able to make that work and find a way, because I know what a relief it can be to have that guidance, especially when you're transitioning to a season that is a bit more flexible after 40 weeks of focus, discipline, not even having a sweetener, to then suddenly I'm going to go to a coffee shop and get an almond milk latte. Like that is a
Yeah.
different mentality, and to flip that switch on your own can be a challenge where I find generally in the work I do that those athletes end up oscillating consistently between those two. They'll start giving themselves a little freedom in improvement season, and then they judge themselves and they immediately go back to a prep version of themselves. And then that's not what they should be doing, because you don't want to sustain a deficit, as your coach said. And then they go back to the freedom, and it's this cycle. But you did talk about this being one of the best things you ever did, and you guys are working on this for your physique. But I couldn't help but wonder if you ever felt any pressure, going back to an earlier point you said about not doing this for other people. And now you are a pro athlete, so it sounds like there's a little bit of a different approach here. But did you ever feel pressure after achieving those wins to go and make a pro debut and continue the season?
I didn't feel pressure from other people. I felt pressure from myself. I
Mm.
have such high expectations of myself, and I set such high standards for myself. And that's probably one of the biggest things I struggle with my personal relationships on a day-to-day basis, is that I, when people don't uh, exist and function at the level I do, I find it really hard to like empathize and understand that not everybody wants to change the world and be a pro bodybuilder and to wake up at 4 a.m. and to do this, and not
Right.
everybody wants to do. Some people just want to live a comfortable life and chill, and I find it hard. It's almost that perfectionist in me that it's like it's okay for not everyone to be, functioning the way you function, but I get frustrated and I get confused when I'm like, like why
Yeah.
aren't you up? Why are you asleep until 7? Like, that's so weird. You're wasting your days, you know? Um, but pressure, I didn't feel necessarily from other people. I just felt pressure for myself. I felt like by not doing the Japan Pro, because I had Japan booked to do the Amateur Olympia.
Mhm.
And I felt like by going to Japan on a holiday and not doing the pro show, I was picking the easy route. And I was bowing out early. Troy and my partner were probably the only two that didn't want me to do the show. Everyone else was obviously incredibly encouraging of me doing it. And Troy actually said to me, he was like, "You're not big enough for a pro show, so you're not going to get the result you want." Like, he was pretty blunt about that, and that's the best thing about Troy. He is a no bullshit kind of coach. He said, if you want to go for experience and you don't care about placing, that's fine. Go do that. But if you genuinely want your pro debut to be meaningful, it's not going to be meaningful doing a pro debut in 4 weeks. You can't change much of your physique to level up to a pro in 4 weeks. He also said, a lot can change in 4 weeks. Right now, you're on a high and you're loving competing. If you push it just that little bit too far, you're going to get to a point where it's like, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I don't want to do it anymore. 4 weeks is a long time. Like, he goes, I want you to finish with this taste in your mouth of you love it, not a sour taste in your mouth. It's kind of that, quit while you're ahead thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also he recognized, he was like, this could be potentially your last opportunity to travel recreationally, because now every time you travel, it's going to be to compete to the States. So why not take this holiday with your partner, give him his girlfriend back, eat some food, have some fun, be a human, and then we can reevaluate when you get back. So I definitely didn't feel pressure from other people, but I really struggled that I felt like I was being a bad athlete. I was being lazy. I was taking the easy route. I was giving up early. I was picking eating food over what I really wanted to do, which was bodybuilding. And I guess that's where my work ethic and that athlete mentality comes in, that I just had such high expectation of myself that God forbid I choose to do something wild like go on a holiday.
Yeah.
That would be an athlete.
Yeah, well, especially when your athlete mentality for the last almost year was just to get to stage and to do this execution to a T. To think about not doing it for another 4 weeks almost feels criminal, because you're like,
Yeah,
oh, well, what's another 4 weeks? I've done this for, but
yeah,
it's good you had, the external sanities to support you working through that. But I understand even sometimes when we hear what we know we need to hear, it doesn't convince that inner voice in ourselves telling us, oh, but a pro would do this, or oh, but a different athlete might do this. So being able to let that go and end your season when you did, and actually even experience what you did, probably was pivotal in a positive way towards how you view yourself and how you view being an athlete and how you're going to carry yourself as a pro.
yeah. It was I think it helped that it was coming from Troy, who, like I said, I value his opinion greatly more than pretty much anyone. And I know that he's experienced in this. The guy knows what he's doing. He just turned me pro in my first season. Like, if he's telling you to do something,
Yeah.
fucking do it. Just shut up and do it, But also my partner was the other person that really just wanted, he's heard the horror stories of me prepping before from my friends. I obviously wasn't with him when I was with that coach, but he's heard the horror stories and he just didn't want to see that happen again. And I think the fact of the matter is he just wanted his partner back. Like, he just wanted his girlfriend. And when those two people, who are probably some of the most important people in my lives, are the ones telling me don't do it, it was like, Philippa, sometimes you need to listen. And it was such a learning curve, because it was the harder option for me. Like, the easier option would have been to compete, to keep going, to push through it, because that's my default. Like, that is my default.
Exactly.
Don't give up, you don't quit, you don't be lazy. It was harder for me to do less and to be a normal person. But it was a learning curve, because now it's like, funnily enough, I have this thing now where I really want to do Tokyo Pro, because it was the first pro show that I went and watched. And I'm like, I want to be on that stage and be able
It
to
was
say,
an
well,
epic stage.
yeah, it was not insane.
Thing.
But I want to be able to be like, wow, a year ago I was here watching and now I'm on. Like, there was a lot that came from, I got to travel with my partner for the first time, which was incredibly rewarding. Like, this is the thing. We went to Japan and we went out one night and got drunk. And I go, this is our first time being drunk together. And we've been together for over a year, because I've been in prep the whole
Yeah.
time. Like, it was
Okay,
just
wait,
normal.
can we talk about that? Dating when in prep, like meeting
Oh,
someone when you were in prep.
so I had met him, well, like probably about 6 months before I went into prep, but we only became official about 2 months before prep. Like, I knew of him.
Yeah.
I just met him through friend groups and stuff like that. And then we started dating in December, and then I went into prep in February. And it was hard as well, because obviously December's filled with work Christmas parties, friend Christmas parties, family Christmas. So we didn't get us time. We were going out and stuff, but it was always other people. We'd been on one date, like one official date, and then I went into prep. So we hadn't really been drunk together. We hadn't been to the movies together. We hadn't been on a picnic together. We hadn't been away together. Like, we'd done nothing mundane. We hadn't even Oh my God, I remember in Japan, we woke up and went for breakfast. That was our first time getting breakfast together. A
I
year into the relationship, because we just hadn't had time to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, he's probably a better person to speak to about me, because I always say that the hardest, like the person that takes competing the hardest is the partner. They don't get anything out of it. They don't get the reward. They don't get the trophy. They don't get to experience the feelings that we feel. They just have to sit there and watch us be hungry. They just have to sit there and watch us be tired. They have to bring us to their family events and explain to all their family members why we're eating chicken and rice. Like, it is freaky. God, I would hate to date a bodybuilder. I couldn't think of anything worse, to be honest. But for some reason, like, he was incredibly supportive. He was my rock through the entire thing. And anytime, like, I would go to him and be like, I'm tired, I'm hungry. He was never the boyfriend that was, oh, I know, I can imagine, like, oh, you poor thing. He was, I know, you've got cardio to do. You're okay. Go do it. You'll be fine. Like, he kept me very grounded. And I was like, yeah, I can do it. He didn't feed that energy of, I'm tired, I'm this. He just sideswiped it. And I found that was incredibly beneficial. He was backstage at every single show. He had his little camera. He was taking photos. Like, he was the loudest cheering in the audience. He was running between microwaves trying to heat my food up in between my divisions. Like, even asked Troy, he sat with Troy in every single division, would sit there and ask, what are you looking for? What's the difference between her? You're using this term flat, you're using this term, carved up. What's the difference? What does she need to fix using, so I can pass the message on? Like, he wanted to learn. He wanted to respect the sport. He wanted to know what's good and what's not. And even Troy speaks so incredibly highly of him. So I'm very, very blessed to have him. Yeah, I'm very, very proud of him.
Yeah, and he's not into fitness or bodybuilding.
He trains, but he couldn't think of anything worse. Whenever people ask, they're like, "Oh, do you want a bodybuild?" He's like, "Fuck, no."
No way.
He's like, that's for her to do, and that can be her thing only. Like, he trains. We'll be going to the gym after this. But yeah, he has his own things, and I almost like that. I would not want to date a bodybuilder. If I'm doing it all day, I want to come home and talk about how's your day? What did you do? Like, let's not talk about the gym. Let's talk about let's have some other substance in our relationship. So I like that there's variety and diversity.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think that's very attractive. Something that I desire personally is like someone I'm not talking about bodybuilding with all the time. I want to
Yeah.
be able to talk about that, but like sometimes it's just I'm bored of it. Can I talk about something else? Like, there's other things that light me up. Bodybuilding is something that is my lifestyle. I do it, right? Like, you wake up, you do the things, it's habitual, it's your lifestyle. It's not something I'm consciously like, I have to do this. It's like, I do this. It's just part of, so it's like, there's so many other things that excite me and light me up. So I love that you have that together. And I especially love that while he was there and supporting you, he was fully immersed in it. And then he was also there at the end to say, hey, let's go enjoy our vacation. Let's connect in this way. And you guys had those experiences too. So clearly this is someone who's very supportive, and clearly you have great support systems in your life who are encouraging you when you need it, even when you don't need it. And they're telling you like, this is probably what's best. They have your best interests at heart and you can trust them. So I just think that's wonderful. And you said you're growing right now with Troy, like you guys are focused on growth. So what is the current physique focus, or maybe workout split? What are the things you guys are doing to create the future Miss Bikini Olympia goal?
We are pushing day and night to grow those glutes. Glute density as well is a massive thing. I had a great rear shot. It was one of my favorite shots. However, I had to get so lean to bring that in. And it was probably edging on a little bit too lean. So the goal is to bring up the lower body so I never have to get that lean for it to be visible ever again. So shoulders and glutes are the goal. Also, because I was in prep for so long, my metabolism took a hit. So to build up the metabolism, so I don't have to have a prep where my calories are ever as low as they were, because it towards the end it did get quite peasanty. And also being on antidepressants made it hard with my metabolism. So we did have to bring the calories quite low to get to where we needed to be stage lean. So I think now building up the metabolism, growing as much as possible. I still check in with him once a week. This year we've decided together I'm taking off entirely. And then the plan is next year to go and do a pro circuit. And ideally, like obviously nothing's set in stone, I would love to go over for like 3 months and do multiple shows, not just like 1 or 2 shows. Like I don't know what shows yet, but I'd love to just do 8 or 9 shows. Like that would be my dream, to just smash it out. But in the meantime, until I get there and start prep next year, this is just a matter of training hard, getting my metabolism in a good place. I currently train legs 3 times a week, and then my Tuesday, so I do glutes. When I say legs, we're talking glutes. Obviously.
Yes.
Bikini. I'm doing glutes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then I also train glutes and shoulders Tuesday, and then upper body in general Thursday. Cardio is so minimal. It's like 25 minutes 2 or 3 times a week, just to keep cardio in check. I like to every few weeks just do an hour straight on the stepper, or if not even longer, just like to mentally make sure I have it in me, because I'm like, there's going to come a time where I need to do an hour or 90 minutes on the stepper. So every few weeks, it's just like a little progress test, just to make sure I still mentally have the capacity to sit on the stepper for an hour. So I'll do that just out of my own time. And then, yeah, I'm doing little things like yoga. I'm still dancing. So just all my little extracurricular that finally it's like I have energy to do, which is really, really nice.
That's amazing. Well, I'd love to hear that. I'm excited to see this journey. And obviously, we've talked about so many things, and I've absolutely appreciated and valued your vulnerability, your openness, your candor. So, what would be your best advice to somebody who has never competed before but wants to? And then your best advice for someone who's on their road to pro?
My best advice to someone who has never competed before, enjoy the ignorance, enjoy the naivety, enjoy not knowing, because your competing experience changes a lot when you then have expectation. You know, if you win, you then have this pressure and expectation to continue to win. Right now, you don't know where you fall in terms of competitiveness. You don't know if you're going to love it. You don't know if you're going to hate it. Like, you have no expectation. There's no pressure. It's almost, before it gets serious, enjoy the fun of it and enjoy the not knowing and the naivety and because it's the same thing as with like IFBB. I had no clue what I was in for. And there's something almost beautiful and innocent about that. So enjoy that. And then to someone who is on the road to turning pro, one of my favorite bits of advice is handle hard better. Nothing is ever going to get easier. You just learn to handle hard better. Prep will never get easier. Lifting the weights will never get easier. Working will never get easier. Uni's never going to get easier. You just learn to handle hard better. So when things get tough, just handle hard better. That's what I tell myself, you know, because I feel like a lot of times people are like, you know, I just have to get through exams and then life will be easier. I just have to get through prep through these next 4 weeks and life will be easier. There's always something else. You get through prep and then your car breaks down. and then you're financially, there's all, that's life. Like life is, that is actually, it's funny. It's like, that is actually life, just a series of events and challenges to overcome and work your way through. That is literally what it like living is all about. So don't wait for things to get easier. Learn to handle hard better.
That's awesome. I love that. That's such an easy one to remember too.
Yeah.
Like it'll stick with you. So I can see how that has. And I appreciate you sharing that and passing that on to us as well. How can people connect with you and follow your journey and witness all this?
So you can follow me on Instagram, Phillippa_Ferreira. I also have TikTok as well, Phillippa_Ferreira, same thing. Reach out to me, DM me. I love connecting with girls. So many girls just message me and update me about their preps, and I'm like, yeah, go, like sending voice memos and stuff like that. If you ever see me out and about at whether it's at the gym or at shows, like please come and say hi. I love meeting people. I feel absolutely blessed when people come up to me. It's still the most surreal thing. Yeah, and if you ever have any questions or want advice or just want to have a chat in general, please, you're more than welcome to reach out to me and we'll chat.
Oh, that's so awesome. We'll put that in the show notes page. So you guys, that's always on celestial.fit/podcast. If you're listening right away, it's at the top of that page. If you're listening in the future, scroll down to the category section. It's alphabetized. Not just the links will be there, but also a full episode summary. You're also going to see a bulleted list of all the topics we covered and the episode timestamps so you can go back and listen to your favorite parts or share this with your teammates, your friends, your family. Let them know what resonated. And of course, it means so much when you guys tag us on Instagram where you share this. I mean, obviously it helps get the word out about the podcast even more, but it's really about saying thanks to the athletes for coming on and sharing this. I feel like we're one big family and community, and there's so many opportunities to connect when we do that. So take the opportunity, and we appreciate it so much. So thank you all for listening. And Phillippa, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It has been. And I hope that you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you're listening to this episode. Just fuck it off.